Sometimes horsepower has a way of hiding in plain sight. A month ago, I would have told you that the stock C6 LS2 air filter intake assembly was decent, but then I did this video on heat soak and it changed my mind. I still do think the stock LS2 air filter assembly is efficient, but the fact that it's situated so high up in the relatively small and sealed engine bay means that it has to ingest air that's a lot warmer than it needs to be, and sometimes that air is downright hot. The problem with the engine ingesting hot air is that physics tells us for every 10 degrees we increase the air intake temperature, we lose about 1% of our horsepower. This is because hot air has materially less oxygen for a given volume of air versus the same volume of cold air. So with the C6 sucking in all of that hot air, especially after sustained periods of slow speeds or shortly thereafter when heat soak has had a chance to build up, it's like the C6's intake is giving away free horsepower. Here, free horsepower, who wants it? Why would we give away horsepower for free? Especially since we all know how hard it is to make horsepower. So I decided a solution is in order for the C6 to help it to be able to suck in some of the colder air that's available down lower in that front bay area. Luckily, these cars have been around for almost 20 years, and so plenty of smart minds have already focused on this problem, so I decided to evaluate all of the aftermarket cold air intake offerings available for the C6. And it didn't take long to figure out that the Veraram Snake Charmer and the Haltech Killer Bee are two of the more popular cold air intake options with the C6 crowd. I gave the Veraram Snake Charmer serious consideration because it's priced reasonably and it's got that front ram air scoop, and if that's a real thing, the Veraram is taking advantage of it. So far, and this could change down the road, I've decided against the Veraram for now because with that scoop right in the center of the mouth of the C6, it's going to pick up all the dirt, debris, rain and water, and in Minnesota we have these things called juicy fat bugs all summer long. So I feel like I would be changing and cleaning the air filter often. And also you have to cut this giant hole in the radiator shroud, and that would need patching if we ended up putting a supercharger on this at some point in the future. I also took a look at the Haltech Killer Bee cold air intake, which includes their hive, which is really a shroud. And I must say it looks attractive to me because that shroud looks like it does a nice job of separating the front bay area where the air filter resides from the engine bay area and all the hot air that creates. And it looks like it would do a really nice job of keeping that hot air from being able to find its way into the air filter. Interestingly enough, the Haltech instructions specifically say not to cut the radiator shroud like we did for the Veraram Snake Charmer. Haltech seems to think that there's definitely enough natural openings down low in that front bay area to supply sufficient cold air to the air filter. Unfortunately, there is a problem, and the problem that I see is, in my humble opinion, the Haltech Killer Bee with their hive is priced a little high, coming in at over $600. As luck would have it, about this same time I came across a thread on CorvetteForum.com by Who Demands, and I was super impressed with his homemade attempt at kind of the Haltech Killer Bee hive situation. And it looks very impressive how the shroud looks, and it also looks like that shroud does a nice job of keeping that engine bay heat away from the air filter assembly. With that in mind, and the fact that the materials for this homemade shroud only cost a little over $20, I decided it's something that I absolutely need to take a stab at. But before I went any further, I wanted to do a little research on the stock LS2 air filter assembly, and I came across an article where they were interviewing Jordan Lee, who was an engineer on the C6 program, and he said that the C6 was engineered so that its air filter assembly flowed 31% better than the stock air filter assembly in the C5. And that led a little more confidence to my hands-on conclusion that I made by reviewing the stock C6 LS2 air filter assembly, where I confirmed that it looks like it flows pretty decent. My hands-on examination of the LS2 air filter assembly did lead me to one area that looks like it needs a little massaging. It's where the individual air filter assemblies meet the center section. There's kind of a rough edge, harsh lip. And it looks to me like that could benefit from some massaging with the die grinder, so I'm going to take care of that now. Now that that's taken care of, we can proceed with the project. So I'm going to go ahead and attempt to make my own beehive, like the Haltech has, to keep this shielded from the hot engine bay and keep it cool with all the air coming in from the front so that it's sucking in cold air from the stock air filter assembly. And in order to make it, I've got this high density polyethylene. This is a 2x3 sheet I've gotten from Menards, kind of like a Home Depot here in the Midwest. $19.95. I don't want to mess this up because it's $20 a pop. Not the end of the world if I do, but I'd rather mess this up first. So I'm going to try making my prototype out of cardboard first. And once we get that down pat, the plan is to transfer it to the plastic and then cut it out once we know we're good. I've gone ahead and traced a line that curves along with the nose, and it does have to drop down here about 1 inch because the lip here on the hood is about 1 inch deep, so it does settle down that deep. So I've traced that line out. I'll make that cut, and then I have to start making cuts for the air bridge. Okay, here's the line that has the curvature of the front part of the Corvette. I've also drawn a line right down the middle at 14 inches, which is right in the center. That way when I start making a cut for the air bridge, hopefully it's symmetrical. I've gone along and kind of scribed a line on the sides of the air bridge here, and there's a little bit of a bend through the middle, so this is going to be kind of a compound curve. We'll give this a cut. We'll just keep trimming a little bit at a time and see what happens. I'm just using a regular sheet metal snips, and it works pretty decent to cut this nice. Starting to take shape. I'm liking it. Now I'm going to start cutting out the middle part. It's probably going to be the most difficult part to make sure I don't overdo it. Looking good. Now I've got these gaps on the side that I have to take care of, so we'll do the same thing. I'll start out with cardboard, I'll make the pattern, and then I'll transfer it to the plastic sheet. Oh man, I really can't wait to do some intake temperature testing.